Number 10. Number 10 goes to the Mario Party games. Which one? Any of them. There are 4 Mario Party games on the GameCube, those being Mario Party 4, 5, 6, and 7. I pretty much have the same thoughts on all of them. You move across massive boards battling for coins and stars as well as playing a series of varied mini-games. All of these games handle this concept just as well as you would hope, and provide memorable boards and mini-games to play. I tend to play Mario Party 5 the most, but that's mostly because that's the one I had the most exposure to, both at friends' houses and through the occasionally borrowed demo disc. However, I think they're all worth looking into. Number 9. Something that people either seem to love or hate about Nintendo's lineup on the GameCube is how they were trying really different things, both with their already existing IPs and even some new ones such as Geist, Eternal Darkness, and Odama. However, there's one case of this that I haven't heard a single person say didn't pay off. I'm of course talking about the Pikmin games. Now, when making this list, I decided to keep it to one game per franchise or sub-series. However, just like with the Mario Party games, I think Pikmin and Pikmin 2 are fairly evenly matched, which may surprise some people as Pikmin 2 is often regarded as the superior game. Both are pretty inventive strategy games with an emphasis on direct interaction. The premise in the original Pikmin is that you crash on a planet and you have to find all of the parts of your spaceship in 30 days. If you don't find the necessary parts in time, your life support systems will fail. Whereas in Pikmin 2, you return to your homeworld only to find that the company that you work for is going bankrupt and is out of resources. However, your employer sees that the random trash you brought with you is worth a lot of money. So instead of finding ship parts, you're finding treasures. But both games involve you using your Pikmin to traverse these hostile environments to retrieve the items of subject and bring them back. However, Pikmin 2 has you switch back and forth between Olimar and newcomer Louie, which very cleverly ties into the strategy element. That, and here, you don't have to worry about the 30-day time limit. However, and this is going to sound completely insane, but I actually liked what the time limit brought to the game. It provided incentive to be as efficient as possible and gave weight to what you were doing. You felt like you had more to lose, which made you want to push through and come out victorious. It actually reminds me of the Rogue Squadron games in that regard. It's frustrating, yes, but it's the kind of frustration that I think is welcome for a strategy-heavy game such as this. I'm also not the biggest fan of the dungeons in Pikmin 2. I don't hate them, but I'm not exactly a fan of dungeon systems in games anyway. Now, what makes up for this is how switching between characters, as well as the new kinds of Pikmin, bring a new form of strategy to the mix, and I feel that for a sequel, this was probably the best route to take. Many of you might disagree with me, but those are my thoughts. Number 8. I don't think I'm saying anything new when I say that I'm not a big fan of the Zelda series. Now, does that mean that I hate every single game in the series? Nope. In fact, I really like Wind Waker. In many respects, a lot of what I personally want to get out of Ocarina of Time, I got out of this. For instance, I was legitimately invested in what was going on. To start, I felt that Link had a well-established personality in this, and the more cartoony art style really allows him and the other characters to emote and express themselves. Then there was a whole plot thread about a bunch of little girls being abducted, one of which is Link's sister, and we see the effect this has on Link and some of the other characters. And the game is very smart, at least comparatively, to establish a relationship between Link and the sister before she's taken away, but not to the point where it feels too contrived or manipulative. Even Ganon is given motivation in this, but that's where I'll stop. The point is that I was invested in these characters and I want to continue playing to see what happens. As for the gameplay, I liked exploring these islands and interacting with the people there, and even seeing them interact with each other. Even the dungeons I felt were designed legitimately well all the way through. I actually felt like I was being rewarded for analyzing my surroundings as opposed to being punished for doing so. That and they felt more connected to the overworld gameplay, not so much for how they were designed, but more so for their tone. I felt like I was going on an adventure exploring islands and sailing, and I felt like I was going on an adventure in the dungeons. That and some of the music is admittedly pretty good, especially Dragon Rouge Island. It's funny too, because while I do have access to the GameCube version, it's not my game. It's actually my brother's who took up all of the slots, and I didn't have a new memory card until not too long ago. Meanwhile, when I got a Wii U at a GameStop, the employee insisted that I get the Zelda bundle. I didn't really want to say I'm not into Zelda, seeing how that alone has gotten me into trouble, and I eventually just gave in and got the Zelda bundle, along with Sonic Lost World and a Pro Controller. When I got around to playing it, I was surprised by just how much I liked it. I played Ocarina of Time all the way through out of a sense of obligation. Here, I did so because I legitimately enjoyed it that much. Number 7. Kirby Air Ride. I underestimated this game big time. I never really frowned upon it, but I just kind of left it alone and thought, not really my thing. However, it turned out that it was, because when I started playing it, I was glued to the screen for hours.
Somebody get me off of this thing!
This is a kart racer where, just like the other Kirby games, you can eat enemies and gain their powers. You have a variety of modes to try out, from the regular races to an overhead perspective similar to games like Super Cars, and a wide-open free-roaming mode called City Trial, in addition to various bonus modes. The courses in the game are very imaginative and fun to navigate, and the map in City Trial is really fun to explore. If I had any problems with the game, is that the AI is very unbalanced, so I'd recommend playing the game with friends. That, and the game only uses the analog and A button for control, which in theory makes it more intuitive. However, there's this bizarre learning curve, and it takes a little while to get used to. Once you do, though, the game is really, really fun. Number 6. Mario Kart Double Dash is one of the absolute craziest Mario Kart games, and I love it for that. Instead of playing as a single driver, you play as a duo, with one driving and the other in the back. Both characters can each hold an item, and even have various special items that are specific for each character. This results in one of the most hectic games in the series. However, if that wasn't enough, the course design is really imaginative, and a lot of my favorite Mario Kart courses are in here. Mix that with catchy music, and you get one of my favorite Mario Kart games. It's up there with Mario Kart 8. Number 5. I know that I'm going to piss people off when I say this, but I like Starfox Assault much more than Star Fox 64. It's up there with the original Super Nintendo game for me, very much like F-Zero GX. A lot of that comes from the level design, actually. For instance, in the asteroid stage alone, you not only come across asteroids with devices attached to them that cause them to home in on you when you get close. Not only does it have these weird things, but then you find an abandoned base, you fly inside where you come across various obstacles, and then doors start closing off the main path, so you have to find these alternative paths, and this stuff is just really clever! That, and seeing the Galaxian ships as enemies, was an awesome cameo. There are also more wide open sections where you'll be assigned an objective and you'll have to come up with a strategy in order to get through. These levels remind me a lot of the Rogue Squadron games, and for me, that is awesome. Then there are the ground missions, which are infamous, but I actually really like some of them, and even how they tie into the strategic flight missions. I don't know, I never took much issue with them. Overall, I felt this was one of the more passionate and creative titles in the series, and it definitely held my interest. Number 4. I mentioned before that I wasn't going to include multi-platform games, and specifically said that Pac-Man World 2 was not going to be on this list. However, even with that said, I think it's pertinent to recommend it here. Not because it's the best 3D platformer I've ever played, along with having some of the best music that I've ever heard in my life, though all that certainly helps, but in this case, the Player's Choice Edition comes with a new multiplayer GameCube exclusive called PacMan Versus. It's a game that I've talked about before, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here. It's a multiplayer maze game that utilizes the Game Boy Advance connector cable. The player with the Game Boy Advance plays as Pac-Man, and the others play as the ghost trying to find Pac-Man. Not only is this a brilliant idea, but it's executed just as good as you could possibly hope. Though with Shigeru Miyamoto being behind it, that shouldn't be too much of a surprise. Number 3. You all saw this game coming. Yeah, one thing that I can say about the GameCube's library that I don't think too many people will argue with me on is that there were a ton of great multiplayer games, with this being a huge example. One thing that I've always loved about the Smash Bros. Games is the imaginative stages, and this game really delivers on that. As far as my favorite game in the series goes, it's a close tie between this and Smash 4. This for the stages and atmosphere, and Smash 4 for the character selection. It's a lot of fun to play with friends as long as you're not playing with the super competitive types that force you to play their way and constantly mock you for being more casual, not super familiar with every last line of the game's code. Moving on, that can be obnoxious and annoying. However, if that's too much of a problem, there's always the awesome adventure mode. In my early teenage years, I would walk to the nearest video store all the time and rent this game just to play the adventure mode. It's fast and short, yes, but it's fun as hell, and trying it over and over again with a different character each time is something I certainly did a little too much of. But I don't care. That and the music is great. It's mostly wonderfully reorchestrated versions of classic Nintendo songs, and it really works, and having an excellent main theme helps too. Overall, it's a fantastic game that I would recommend if you could get your hands on it. Oh, the game sold well and everything, but It's in really high demand, so actually trying to get a copy is very comparable to the hectic fights within the game itself. However, if you have a friend with a GameCube, they probably have this game, so play it there and see if it's worth it. Number 2. As a kid, for whatever reason, I wasn't allowed to get any Nintendo games, so no Smash Brothers, Mario Kart, Luigi's Mansion, and so forth. Don't get me wrong though, I did have some really good games back then, like the Haunted Mansion, Pac-Man World 2, and even my number 1 entry on this list. However, there's one game that I always begged for, and looked at my friends in envy when it was established they had it. That being Super Mario Sunshine. I'd seen other 3D platformers before, but none that were quite like this. I guess I should start with the story, which is definitely a weird place to start for a Mario game, but I digress. Mario is going on a vacation to a tropical paradise called Isle Delfino. However, it's not a paradise anymore due to rampant pollution in the form of a toxic paint-like substance. Mario is framed for this crime and is forced to clean it all up with a contraption named Flood. Flood has several different nozzles that perform several different actions such as spraying, hovering, shooting high up into the air, and then you have my personal favorite, the Turbo Nozzle. The environments are huge and are really fun to traverse and explore. It takes the game design philosophy of Super Mario 64 and really takes it to a whole new level in that regard. Granted, it does emphasize on all of the areas where 64 was different from the Mario games of the past, which did result in some criticism, but I think it results in the game working better on its own as opposed to leeching off of prior titles. It very much has its own identity, but the gameplay is still close enough to Mario 64 to be called a sequel, and as its own game, it holds up really well. Number 1. I've talked about the Rogue Squadron games a lot, haven't I? It's one of my absolute favorite game series of all time, and the first game on the Nintendo 64 is my favorite game, period. However, despite it being one of the first games I had ever played, I didn't own it growing up. Instead, I owned the GameCube games, Rogue Leader and Rebel Strike. Both of these games are amazing. However, I decided to go by a one game per franchise or sub-series rule, unless I liked the number of games in the aforementioned series equally and would try to express my thoughts on all of them. However, here, there's no contest. My heart goes to Rebel Strike. I cannot express in words just how much I love this game, but I'm going to try. To start, from every standpoint imaginable, this game pushes the system to its absolute limits. For instance, the game is gorgeous. Now that I've played every exclusive title, I can say that this game has the best graphics on the system. My capture card does not do this game justice at all. Play this game on a good CRT TV, and hopefully you'll see what I mean. Moving on to the sound, this game was designed for 5-channel surround sound systems with compatibility for 7-channel surround sound systems. This translates well into gameplay, seeing how you can tell where things are by audio alone. Then you have the music. You get a lot of John Williams compositions, which is always great, but then you have a ton of original compositions by Turrican composer Chris Hulsbeck, and he does a fantastic job as always. This time around, he combines John Williams' style with his own, and that's as awesome as it sounds. Easily one of the best soundtracks on the system. Also, it's amazing just how much this game crams into the 1.5 gigabyte mini DVD. In the single player mode, you have 2 campaigns in addition to several bonus missions. Then you can play the entirety of Rogue Leader's campaign in an awesome co-op mode. Then you have plenty of versus modes including Dogfight, Rampage, Attack and Defend, and Races. Before I move on, I should say that this game has some of the best multiplayer on the system, and if you're looking for some more multiplayer action on the GameCube after you've exhausted Mario Kart and Smash Brothers, this is a great one to check out. Then you have a music hall, art gallery, unlockable documentary, and audio commentaries for every stage in the game, and even the original Star Wars Atari arcade games. Then there are the various unlockable crafts, which I'll get to later. Okay, so with all of that said, how about the gameplay? After all, just because a game is technically impressive, that doesn't inherently make it a good game. And thankfully, this is a damn good game. Like the prior Rogue Squadron games, Rebel Strike is a mix of action, simulation, exploration, and strategy. Once you start a mission, you'll be given your objective along with some direction. However, from there you have to come up with strategies of how you'll achieve your end goal. It might not be as heavy on the strategy and exploration of the original, but I feel that finds a healthy balance. This time around, there's also more of an emphasis on vehicle sections, allowing you to man a speeder bike, an ATST, and even an AT-AT in certain missions. There are also on-foot missions that a lot of people hate, but I don't. I think they're fine for what they are, and I especially love Battlefield Hoth. Then there's the story. Very much like the first game, it's really subtle in the way that's conveyed. You really have to analyze the little details in the background in order to get understanding of the narrative, but it is there, and I find it to be pretty engaging. Then there's the game's tone. As far as Star Wars games go, this gets pretty intense and unwelcoming. For instance, at the end of one stage, one of the transports you are protecting is boarded, the crew gets abducted, and the transport is subsequently destroyed. In the next mission, you're trying to track the culprit down, and just watch this cutscene and listen to the music.
You must stop that craft from leaving the system. We've got support craft heading your way. You're on your own until help arrives.
However, this isn't just on a presentation level. To provide an example at Not So Random, in one of the stages you infiltrate what you believe to be an Imperial weapons facility with an A-Wing. Your job is to fly in and report critical points for the Y-Wings to bomb. I should also mention that the A-Wing is the fastest ship, but has the weakest shields. As you fly through the tunnels, you really get a sense of isolation. However, at the end of the tunnel, just watch.
Picking up fighters on my scope. They're not like anything I've seen before. Those must be the new TIE hunters. Be careful, they're deadly. Understood. They've activated some sort of force field. I'm trapped. Wedge, we can't reach you. You're on your own.
Not only are you facing off against new experimental TIE fighters that you know nothing about, not only are you piloting the weakest ship, leaving you extremely vulnerable, but you're trapped in there, and there are a ton of them. You really get the sense of dread and hopelessness, not just on a presentation level, but from the gameplay as well. When you hear me talking about how much I love Factor 5, this stuff is why. This also brings up a very interesting aspect of the game. You are awarded additional player craft based on your performance, and when playing a stage again with a different ship, you'll have to reanalyze your surroundings and come up with new strategies even when approaching the same situations due to your different strengths and weaknesses. Some missions even give you multiple ships to try this out with your first time through, so playing around and seeing what works better for you is largely beneficial. It is true that the other Rogue Squadron games did this sort of thing too. However, if there's anything that this game does better than any of the other games in the series, it's this. It really helps give the game more depth than it already has, and really extends its replay value. Speaking of which, when I was playing all these games again for this list, I played this game all the way through in one sitting. And then the next day, I did the same exact thing, simply because I like it that much. And then this morning, I was playing it for hours on end for the same reason. Overall, this is by far my favorite GameCube exclusive, and if you like the sound of what you just heard, I can't recommend this game enough. So, that concludes my list. I hope you enjoyed it, and like I said in the previous part, I'd like to hear some of your favorites as well, especially if they weren't included on this list. Regardless, thank you very much for watching.